provisional cast on can be used anytime that you want to undo your initial cast on edge and knit from the resulting live stitches. So it's great for modular projects or something like a cowl knit sideways, where you want to then Kitchener stitch 2 sets of live stitches together to create a seamless join. The crochet provisional cast on is worked with a crochet hook, and you'll work a chain of crochet stitches, and each of those stitches will make a loop around your knitting needle to give you your cast on stitches. And the crochet method can actually be used as a regular cast on, where you're not going to undo it at the end. You can see it looks very similar to a standard bind off. So if you work that in your working yarn, it can be a nice match for a standard bind off on something where you want both ends to be identical, like a simple scarf. To work the provisional cast on, we'll use scrap yarn, a crochet hook, and just one of the needles. Start by making a slip knot in the waste yarn, and then placing that slip knot onto the hook. Want it snug but not really tight. And then we're going to hold the yarn in the left hand and the needle in the left hand. So it might feel a bit tricky to juggle all of that at first, but you'll get the hang of it. And you can see I've got the needle over the yarn. And what I'm going to do is take the hook over the top of the needle, wrap the yarn around the hook, and then draw it back through my initial slip knot. And that makes another stitch on the crochet hook, and the yarn makes loops around the needle to make our first cast on stitch. So then I'm going to wrap the yarn around the hook again. Before I draw it through, I want to insert the tip of my needle into this sort of triangle here, which will wrap the yarn around the needle again, and then draw it through. So yarn around needle, and then insert the tip of the needle into that triangle, and draw that yarn through the stitch on the hook. So yarn around needle, tip of the needle goes into that triangle, and then draw the yarn on the hook through the stitch on the hook. So you can see I've got my first 4 stitches cast on here, and we're beginning to see that crochet chain emerge along the bottom. So continue repeating the process until you've cast on your desired number of stitches. Once you've cast on all of your stitches, we're going to finish with a few stitches of crochet chain without wrapping the yarn around the needle. So I've got the needle behind, wrap the yarn around the hook, draw it through, and just repeat that a few times. And this gives your crochet chain cast on a sort of little anchor to help prevent it unraveling before you want it to, and it makes it easier at the end to know which side you should be unraveling. So I've got a little chain, and then I'm going to cut the yarn and just pull out that last stitch so the tail comes free, and give it a little tug to keep things secure for now. So then I can set aside my crochet hook and my waste yarn and bring in my working yarn and my second needle. And then we're just going to knit across the cast on stitches with the working yarn. You don't need to tie a knot or anything. I just pinch the tail in the hand that I'm not holding the yarn in. So I hold the yarn in my right hand, so I pinch it in my left hand just for the first couple of stitches, and then that should stay nice and secure while I work across the row. So there's my first row in my working yarn complete, and you can see the crochet chain along the bottom with our little extra chain at the end. Then you're just going to work your project until it's time to undo the cast on. To undo the crochet provisional cast on, we're going to begin by unpicking the first stitch. Just going to carefully undo that, and I'm always starting from the last crochet stitch I worked on my little crochet chain. If you try and undo it from this initial end, it's not going to unzip neatly and you'll have to unpick the yarn from each stitch. So I'm going to undo I've unpicked my first stitch, loosened it up, and then I'm going to pull the end through this loop. And then that will give me a chain that I can start sort of unzipping. And I'm going to grab a needle and I'm going to insert it through the first stitch in the working yarn and then pull out my next crochet chain stitch, insert the needle through the stitch, and just continue like that. Until I've put all of those stitches on the needle. So that's my last stitch undone. You can just see my original slip knot. If I untwist that a little bit, you can also see that the yarn is through a loop at the end, and I'm going to return that to my needle to make sure that I have the same number of stitches on the needle as I originally cast on. Then I've got live stitches on either side and my provisional cast on is unzipped.